By regular attendance in classes on the Bhagavatam, by rendering of service to the pure devotee, all that is troublesome to the heart is almost completely destroyed. And loving service unto the personality of Godhead, is praise through transcendental songs, is established as an irrevocable fact. Narayana Namaskritya Naram Chaiva Narottanam Devim Saraswati Vyasam Tato Jayamudhirayat. Before reciting the Srimad Bhagavatam, which is the very means of conquest, one should offer respectful obeisances unto the personality of Godhead Narayan, and to Nanda Narayan Rishi, the supermost human being, and to Mother Saraswati, the goddess of learning, and unto Srila Vyasadeva, the Bhagavad. Does anyone have a favourite iPads? I've got my keypad up and I can't get rid of it. That's just my tech guru. How do I get rid of that? Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Jnana Janandana Shalakaya Chakshurmiritam Jena Tasmai Sri Gurave Namaha. So today we're reading 3rd Canto, chapter 21, verses 52 to 54. Nayada Bhatamastaya Jatramani Janapitam Vishpurjak Chandat Kodando Ratena Trasayan Agan Svasanya Charanash Shunam Vepayan Mandalam Bhuva
Vigashan Brihatim Senam Patyatasyam Sumamiva Taideva Setava Sarve Vanashram Nibadandana Bhagavad Rachita Rajan Vidyaran Bhatatasyubi. Gentlemen? Nayadada Tamastaya Jaitramani Ganaritam Vispujak Chandakodando Ratena Trasayanagan Nayadada Tamastaya Jaitramani Ganarpitam Vispurjak Chandakodando Ratena Trasayanagan. It's not up. Needs to scroll up. There's more verses there. Anyone want to read? Svasanya Charanashunam Vepayan Mandalam Bhuva Virakshan Brihatim Senam Pachayasyam Samiva Tadeva Sitava Sarve Vanashram Nibandana Bhagavan Rachita Rajan Vidyaran Bhatadasyubi. Ladies? Vasitava Sarve Vanasram Nibandana Bhagavat Rachita Rajan Vidyaran Bhatadasyubi. Thank you. Word for word. Na, not. Yada, when. Ratam, the chariot. Ashtaya, having mounted. Jatram, victorious. Money, of jewels. Gana, with clusters. Apitam, bedecked. Vishpurjat, twanging. Kanda, a fearful sound just to punish the criminals. Godanda, bow. Ratena, by the presence of such a chariot. Trasayan, threatening. Agan, all the culprits. Swasanya, of your soldiers. Charana, by the feet. Shunam, trampled. Vepayan, causing to tremble. Mandalam, the globe. Bhuva, of the earth. Vikasan, leading. Brihatim, huge. Sanam, army. Paryatasi, you roam about. Amsuman, the brilliant sun. Eva, like. Tada, then. Eva, certainly. Setava, religious codes. Sarve, all. Vana, of varnas. Ashram, of ashramas. Bindanaha, obligations. Bhagavat, by the Lord. Rachita, created. Rajan, O king. Vidyaran, they would be broken. Bata, alas. Dasyubi, by rogues. Translation: if you did not mount your victorious jeweled chariot whose mere presence threatens culprits, if you did not produce fierce sounds by the twanging of your bow, and if you did not roam around about the world like the brilliant sun, leading a huge army whose trampling feet cause the globe of the earth to tremble, then all the moral laws governing the varnas and ashramas, created by the Lord himself, would be broken by the rogues and rascals. Repeat after me. If you did not mount your victorious jeweled chariot, whose mere presence threatens culprits, if you did not produce fierce sounds by the twanging of your bow, and if you did not roam about the world like the brilliant sun, leading a huge army whose trampling feet cause the globe of the earth to tremble, then all the moral laws governing the varnas and ashramas, created by the Lord himself, would be broken by the rogues and rascals. Just read the purport. Beautiful verse. Purport. It is the duty of a responsible king to protect the social and spiritual orders in human society. The spiritual orders are divided into 4 ashrams: brahmacharya, grihastha, vanaprastha, and sannyas. And the social orders, according to work and qualification, are made up of the Brahmins, the Kshatriyas, the Vaishyas, and the Sudras. These social orders, according to the different grades of work and qualification, are described in Bhagavad Gita. Unfortunately, for want of proper protection by responsible kings, the system of social and spiritual orders has now become a hereditary caste system. But this is not the actual system. Human society means the society which is making progress towards spiritual realization. The most advanced human society was known as Arya. Arya refers to those who are advancing. The question is, which society is advancing? Advancement does not mean creating material necessities unnecessarily, and thus wasting human energy in aggravation over so-called material comforts. Real advancement is advancement towards spiritual realization, and the community which acted toward this end was known as the Aryan civilization. The intelligent men, the Brahmanas, as exemplified by Kadamba Muni, were engaged in advancing the spiritual cause, and Kshatriyas like Emperor Swayambhu used to rule the country and ensure that all facilities for spiritual realizations were nicely provided. It is the duty of the king to travel all over the country and see that everything is in order. Indian civilization, on the basis of the 4 varnas and ashramas, deteriorated because of her dependency on foreigners, or those who did not follow the civilization of Varnashram. Thus, the Varnashram system has now been degraded into the caste system. The institution of 4 varnas and 4 ashramas is confirmed herewith to be Bhagavad Rachita, which means designed by the Supreme Personality of Godhead. In Bhagavad Gita, this is also confirmed, Chaturvarnam Mayastristam. The Lord says that the institution of 4 varnas and 4 ashrams is created by me. Anything created by the Lord cannot be closed or covered. The divisions of varnas and ashramas will continue to exist, either in their original form or in degraded form. But because they are created by the Lord, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, they cannot be extinguished. They are like the sun, the creation of God, and therefore will remain. Either covered by clouds or in a clear sky, the sun will continue to exist. Similarly, when the Varnashram system becomes degraded, it appears as a hereditary caste system. But in every society, there is an intelligent class of men, a martial class, a mercantile class, and a labourer class. When they are regulated for cooperation among communities according to the Vedic principles, then there is peace and spiritual advancement. But when there is hatred and malpractice and mutual mistrust in the caste system, the whole system becomes degraded, and as stated herein, it creates a deplorable state. At the present moment, the entire world is in this deplorable condition because of giving rights to so many interests. This is due to the degradation of the four castes of Varnas and Ashramas. Fantastic purport. And when I was reading that just then, it reminded me of this quite funny story. Goa in India is predominantly a Catholic place. But hundreds of years ago, 500-600 years ago, it had been conquered by the Portuguese. So all of the residents had to change their names. They were baptised and they had to change their names. So if you see any Indian who's called da Costa, da Silva, etc., you know that they are from Goa. And I remember Jayapataka Maharaj saying once that in Goa, they even in the Catholic cemetery, they'll have divisions, those who are Brahmanas, those who were, all the different classes, even though they had been converted to Catholicism for, centuries. And I remember when I was getting married, my husband wrote to his mother and said, my husband's family's from Goa, and he wrote to his mother, I'm getting married, because we met in India. He said, I'm getting married. And he'd never ever heard of anything to do with caste in his family. They were all meat-eating Catholics, and he was raised in England. And she wrote back and said, whatever you do, don't marry below your caste. You're a Sarasvat Brahmin caste. And I remember my husband and I were just astonished. He'd never ever heard anything to do with their family, Gotra, their heritage. They were meat-eating Catholics. But apparently the Sarasvat Brahmin caste was their Gotra, and she was concerned. So then he wrote back and said, don't worry, I'm marrying an Australian, she has no caste. So she was okay with that. But when I was reading that, I thought that was pretty funny. So here Prabhupada is elaborating about the social and spiritual orders in human society. And he's explaining that the moral laws governing the Varnas and Ashrams are created by the Lord himself. So even if they get covered over or they get mutated as Kali Yuga progresses, still that element is there. And the verse also points out, I've got a cute little bug here, and the verse also points out about the level of responsibility that kings and all leaders have to their subjects. That they're meant to be travelling around. They don't just sit in their palaces or sit wherever, but they're meant to be checking out what's happening in their kingdoms or in the area of responsibility. So to drill that right down to a micro level, in ISKCON we have our GBCs. So they're our ultimate managerial authority, and their duty is to make sure that everything in the zones that they've been delegated to look after is being carried on properly. And to a degree, our temple presidents, etc., that's also their duty to make sure that all of their dependents or all of the devotees who are under their care are being taken care of very nicely. And it's actually very heartening for me when we've got our pastimes New Govardhana and we've got our residents New Govardhana, and that way the farm community reaches out to the devotees who are living off the farm. So after all of the flooding and everything that we've had, and my house is subject to flooding, parts of it, so it was really nice to read either this morning or yesterday morning. If anyone needs help, please let us know. So that's very reassuring that our community is actually caring for devotees and also potential devotees. Like we have our food distribution to the palliative care in town, and that's a wonderful initiative, and it's very reassuring for all the community, not just the devotee community, but all of the community, that there are people there who actually care. It's so important. But unfortunately, in our current society, the monarchs, well, are there any independent kings and queens? No, they're governed by, the King of England's governed by the government. He can't make, his own decisions. He's more or less a figurehead. And we might get, occasionally we might get a Prime Minister or some other Member of Parliament come out to visit, flood-stricken areas or bushfire areas, but they don't actually do that much. They're there and they encourage, but it's very rare to see them as part of a mud army and getting out and clearing up the floods. So unfortunately, they don't necessarily also understand the goal of life. They're focused on some material condition because they don't have that knowledge themselves. Of course, in previous ages, we had Raja Rishis or saintly kings, and they governed very nicely. They enlightened their subjects, encouraging them in their spiritual life. But unfortunately, we don't have that these days. But we do have Srila Prabhupada's wonderful society that he created, and basically covering the world in this tsunami of bhakti. So we're so grateful to Srila Prabhupada that he's given us this shelter. And in 4th Canto, chapter 20, verse 17, Prabhupada writes this: if the king looks after the spiritual interests of the citizens, he can levy taxes without difficulties. In this way, both the subjects and the king will be happy during this life. And in the next life, the king will be able to share 1/6 of the pious activities of the citizens. However, otherwise, by levying taxes on the sinful citizens, he will have to share the reactions of their sinful activities. The same principle can be applied to parents and spiritual masters as well. And by dint of that, with our leaders, our GBC, it's a heavy burden for someone who is in charge of a temple or in charge of a zone. It's a very, very heavy responsibility. And not only because they have their duty, but because they will share in the sinful activities in the next life. So it's incumbent upon them that they ensure that all of those who are dependent on them are following the processes and following the principles. And of course, the spiritual master has the ultimate responsibility of encouraging and enthusing his disciples. So further to Varnashram, in 4.13 Bhagavad Gita, Krishna states a very well-known verse, Chatu Vainam Mayastristam Guna Kama Vibhagasaha Tasya Kataram Apimam Vijakartaram Avyayam. I created the fourfold division of society based on qualities, guna, and work, karma. Although I am the creator of this system, know that I am yet the non-doer and unchangeable. So this verse clarifies that Varna or occupational category is not determined by birth. It's not determined what kind of family I was born in. If all my family are doctors, it doesn't mean that I will automatically be a doctor. Prabhupada uses that example frequently. No, you have to go to university, you have to go through the whole internship, and I believe it takes about 7 years to be a qualified doctor. So it's not because my family, they're all doctors, that I'm automatically recognised as a doctor. no, we have to go through all of the exams and all of that austerities to reach that qualification. So that's where the so-called caste system in India has degraded, because it is determined by what family you're born in. You can be born in a Brahmin family and be an absolute rascal, breaking all the principles, or you can be born in a so-called lower caste family, yet exemplify all the qualities of a Brahmin. So Srila Prabhupada, he was a transcendental visionary, and so was his Guru Maharaj, Bhaktisiddhanta Sarasvati Thakur. So Bhaktisiddhanta Sarasvati Thakur, he broke the boundaries, and he gave Brahmin initiation to those, particularly men. I don't know if he initiated women in Gayatri, but he actually gave initiation to anyone who was qualified. It didn't matter what kind of family they were born into. And Prabhupada went even one step further, where he initiated men and women who came from very degraded backgrounds. There are a lot of malechas amongst us, and we came from, not so qualified families according to the Vedic principles. But Srila Prabhupada uplifted all of us, and he created this society where all devotees, men and women, boys and girls, no matter what their material status is, can all reach that ultimate goal. And what's the ultimate goal? Is the ultimate goal to get Brahmin initiation and be a Brahmin? No. The ultimate goal is that we develop our love for God by practicing sadhana. Good, strong sadhana, and we'll get there. So, and Haridas Thakur, of course, is a wonderful example. He was born in a Muslim family. And even though he is our Namacharya, he's the Acharya of the holy name, Mahaprabhu danced with, when he left his body, Mahaprabhu danced with the body of Haridas Thakur. But Haridas Thakur, he didn't want to try and go into the Jagannath temple because he was born in a Muslim family. He wouldn't have been allowed anyway. And similarly, we're also not allowed to enter the Jagannath temple. And Srila Prabhupada, he wouldn't go to take darshan of Lord Jagannath because his disciples weren't allowed in. And it would be wonderful one day if that ban is lifted, but maybe not in this lifetime. So now let's talk about the four Varnas. So Brahmin, Kshatriya, Vaishya, and Sudra. So the Brahmanas are the teachers, they're the priests, the intellectuals, they're the educators, and they represent knowledge, wisdom, and spiritual guidance. And then we have the warriors and the rulers, that's the Kshatriyas. And what do? They represent protection, administration, and governance. And then we have the merchants and the farmers, who are the retailers. They're the Vaishyas. So they engage in trade, agriculture, and commerce. And then we have the Sudras, and they're the service providers and labourers, and they assist society providing services. So there's the delineation of what those Varnas are. And Krishna emphasises that everyone should perform their prescribed duties according to their Varna and ashram, as seen in Bhagavad Gita 18:45-46. And Krishna says, by following one's nature and duties, one can attain perfection. By worshipping the Lord through one's prescribed work, a person can achieve liberation. So the system is meant to help individuals progress spiritually while maintaining harmony and peace in society. However, Krishna also teaches in Bhagavad Gita 18:66, surrendering to him, bhakti transcends all social and worldly obligations. And in 1968, Prabhupada wrote a letter. And this is the letter. It's very interesting. Character building is the groundwork for seating Krishna consciousness, and the Vedic injunction is that one can advance in spiritual life by following the rules of austerity and celibacy. When we first join this Krishna consciousness movement, we often come with many bad habits and so on. However, by the practice of bhakti yoga, the purification is so powerful that we are transformed in a relatively short amount of time. And that's so true, isn't it? You know, you see someone who joins, starts practicing, in a month or 2 months you can hardly recognise them. They become very effulgent and bright-faced and happy, because this is our natural constitutional position. So what happens when we're doing something that's natural to us? We're happy, exactly. And we feel that relief of the burden that we carry around when we're trying to engage in a material world, or, you know, be placed in the material world. And it's a bleak place. It's a very bleak place. Can you imagine not, suffering all the vagaries of material life and not knowing that there's a higher purpose, not knowing that you don't die when the body dies, that you actually will continue in a different body, and for devotees, hopefully, it'll be a spiritual body. So Prabhupada says, of course, to really remove the anartas or unwanted things in our hearts takes time. We can see how transforming these practices are. So when you first join, you get this immediate sense of relief and joy. But over time, because we have been in this material world for eons, time immemorial, really, it's been that long. After a while, the anartas, those unwanted things that are deep in the heart, they can start manifesting. And that's where it's really important in the practice of bhakti yoga that we can identify the weeds amongst the bhakti lata. It's the plant of devotional service. So we need to always be on guard that, looking at ourselves, not in a judgmental, unhelpful way, but trying to identify, okay, I'm reacting like this to a particular situation. Why am I reacting like that? And then looking to the scripture to give us guidance and understanding. So that's very important, that we get that wonderful sense of bliss and happiness, which of course will continue, but be aware that amongst the bhakti lata, as it grows, as that bhakti lata bij, the seed of devotion grows, also the weeds will grow with it. So we have to be very introspective. We have to be introspective. And then Prabhupada says, of course, to really remove the anartas, unwanted things in our hearts, takes time. We can see how transforming these practices are. And when Prabhupada was asked if he could perform miracles, a journalist asked him, can you perform miracles? He indicated all of his disciples sitting there, and he said, these are my miracles, from hippies to happies. And in Bhagavad Gita, we read about the qualities of a brahmana: peacefulness, self-control, austerity, purity, tolerance, honesty, knowledge, wisdom, and religiousness. These are the natural qualities by which the brahmanas work. And that was 1842. In the next verse, Krishna describes the qualities of the Kshatriyas, or the administrative class. They're heroes, heroism, power, determination, resourcefulness, courage in battle, generosity, and leadership are the natural qualities of work for the Kshatriyas. And in the next verse, Krishna describes the Vaishyas. Farming, cow protection, and business are the natural work for the Vaishyas, or the mercantile class. And for the Sudras, there are labour and service to others. And one shouldn't think that, Sudras, I don't want to be a Sudra. No. all of the different classes are essential to the peaceful governance and betterment for all of the society, or all the members of society. So each are integral. And the wonderful point in Krishna consciousness is that we do the needful. Has anyone heard that saying that Prabhupada would use very often? Do the needful. So we may be a Brahmana, we may have our thread and chant Gayatri, do puja to the deities, but we delight in sweeping Krishna's floor and cleaning Krishna's temple. And Prabhupada said the pujari serving the deity and the person, the devotee, sweeping the temple room floor, gives the same pleasure to Krishna. So that's really important points. No matter what service we're executing, that we understand, who am I? I am Dasya Dasya Anadas. I'm the servant of the servant of the servant of Krishna. And so we engage with enthusiasm, whatever we ask to do, within the confines of our rules and regulations, in the spirit of cooperation. So then we come to talk about the ashrams. So the spiritual orders, or ashrams, are explained in the following way. So there's the brahmacharis, we've got our single celibate monks, and they're focused on what? On study and service. The brahmachari is kind of considered like the support system for the other ashrams. It's not that the brahmachari walks around thinking, I'm better than the grihastas because I'm, a single monk. No, he is the support and offers the service to the other ashramas. And they're focused on leading an uncomplicated life. Once you get married, life becomes more complicated. For those of us who have been grihastas or are grihastas, life becomes much more complicated. So the brahmachari has got this nice uncomplicated life. Prasadam is there, service is there. They're self-disciplined and dedicated to serving, and the focus on celibacy. And they are serving the other ashrams. And in Srila Prabhupada's book, The Transcendental Teachings of Prahlad Maharaj, he writes, Brahmachari has many rules and regulations. For example, however rich one's father may be, the brahmachari surrenders himself to be trained under the guidance of a spiritual master and works in the ashram of the spiritual master just like a menial servant. How is this possible? We're getting actual experience that very nice boys from very respectable families do not hesitate to do any kind of work here. They are washing dishes, cleansing the floors, everything. One student's mother was astonished at her boy when he visited home. Before, he would not even go to the store, and now is engaged 24 hours a day. Having 3 sons, I know what all that's about. Brahmacharis are focused on the service, and they're meant to retain their humility. The saffron cloth carries with it very great responsibility. And one who wears the brahmachari cloth restricts his association with females, and he never accepts service from a woman. He is aware how important it is to retain his sexual purity, both subtle and gross. That doesn't mean to say that the brahmachari won't be kind and gentle, and when he sees a Mataji that he can't say, Hare Krishna, how are you, Mataji? It's not like that. And of course, those of us who have been in the movement a long time, it used to be a bit like that the brahmacharis were women haters. But fortunately, our movements, develop more and more, and there's more clear understanding. And in 276, Prabhupada points out that Krishna is the origin of all austerities and penances because he is the source of everything. He explains that human life is meant for tapasya or austerity with a great vow of brahmacharya. And Prabhupada describes that in the first stage of life, Up to 25 years of age, a man may be trained as a brahmachari under the guidance of a bona fide spiritual master. And then, after 25, if he wants to get married, he can get married. And Prabhupada also says, a bit of a harsh statement on the ladies here, Prabhupada says that if one wants to get freedom from the material bondage of conditional life, he must get free from the attraction for the form of a woman. But we also need to understand that just as for a man, woman is Maya, also for a woman, man is Maya. So it goes both ways. It's not that a temple community has a whole bunch of Maya Devis wandering around just to cause disturbance to the men. No. We have to understand that we are serving in a collegiate fashion, that we respect each other, but we're not freely associating, just for the heck of it. For service, for inquiring how everyone is, that's very important. So this, what I quoted there, was published around the end of 72. And I joined at the end of 72, and there had been somewhat of a paradigm shift about how our Vaishnavis were being treated. It was, earlier than that, it was very brother, sister. It was very collegiate, very, respectfully kind. And then devotees started going to India a little bit more, and as, and they were staying with the Gaudiya mat because we had no temples then. And slowly that kind of attitude to women infiltrated our society a little bit. And then, of course, Bhagavatam would be published that, statements like this, that woman is the real binding force of material existence. So all of a sudden, women became like these creatures to be avoided at all costs. And things became, much more difficult for the women in our movement, much, much more difficult. And if you talk to any of the older ladies, they can tell you some really interesting stories. But that was not Srila Prabhupada's mood. And over time that has softened, and as devotees have become more advanced in their spiritual life, that zealotry against women, fortunately, has altered. And there's been a lot of education that's been, presented by our senior Vaishnavis, enabling devotees to get a full understanding of what that means. Prabhupada, as I said, was a transcendental visionary, and he encouraged unmarried ladies to live in our temples. Now, that was previously unheard of. In Bhaktisiddhanta Sarasvati Thakur's time, women weren't allowed to live in the temples. They would come to the mutt, to the temple, and do service, and in the day they would go back home. But when Prabhupada went to the West, he could see that boys and girls were accustomed to serving with each other, to working with each other. So Srila Prabhupada allowed that, and he said actually that one of the reasons I was so successful in spreading Krishna consciousness was because I allowed boys and girls to serve together. And Srila Prabhupada really appreciated the contributions that women made. And Prabhupada said that, he expected us as Vaishnavis to act on the platform that we're not this body. And he said that, he quoted the Chanakya quote, Chanakya Pandit. He was a social commentator and a politician many hundreds of years ago. And Prabhupada sometimes would quote him. And he quoted, women are less intelligent. And then he did this 4 times in front of Jamuna Devi, who's a senior Vaishnava in our movement since departed. And then when Prabhupada would say it, he would look at her to gauge her reaction. And it happened 3 or 4 times. And in the 4th time, at different occasions, And Prabhupada writes about this in her beautiful, it's written about her in this beautiful book that Dinatarani wrote about Jamuna. And Prabhupada said to Jamuna, so what do you think, Jamuna? And she said, Srila Prabhupada, whatever you say, yes, women are less intelligent. And Prabhupada became quite ferocious. And he said, if you think you are a woman, then you are less intelligent. So this is what we function, the platform we function on is, and we're trying to function on, is that we are not this body. We're not women, we're not men, we're not superior, we're not inferior. We are all servants of Krishna and servants of our spiritual master. And Prabhupada said that the sannyasis in India were criticising him for allowing women to live in the temples. And because in India there was an exception. So when I spent most of my early devotional life in India, in Calcutta Temple and Mayapur Temple, and the Indian devotees weren't allowed to live in the temple. But the ladies. But that was because of cultural and societal issues. Because, at least in those days, probably changed a bit now, but unmarried girls never went away from the home. They always stayed at their parents' home. So their parents would have kicked up a really big fuss if their daughters wanted to move into the ashram. So for that reason, Prabhupada wanted to keep the peace, so he didn't encourage that. And I remember two wonderful Bengali devotees, Matajis, they would come every day and do beautiful service, and then at home, in the evening they catch the train or the bus and go home to their parents. And in First Canto, chapter 9, 27, verse 27, this is really interesting. Prabhupada wrote this. He said, as far as the woman class are concerned, they are accepted as a power of inspiration for men. As such, women are more powerful than men. Mighty Julius Caesar was controlled by Cleopatra. So it's very important that women don't use that Shakti that women have, and they keep it, in control. And how do they keep it in control? They keep it by being chaste and shy. Because women have that power over men. And Prabhupada also warned against indiscriminate discrimination and denigrating remarks. And he wrote this. And it was a room conversation in Seattle in 1968. Prabhupada says, now another thing, that girls should not be taken as inferior, you see? Sometimes, of course, sometimes scripture we say that woman is the cause of bondage. So that should not be, I mean to say, aggravated. And Prabhupada laughed. That should not be aggravated, that woman is inferior, or something like that. So the girls who come, you should treat them nicely. And in Calcutta in 72, Prabhupada was on a morning walk with a whole lot of brahmacharis. And this one particular brahmachari was whinging like anything to Prabhupada about the women, because we lived in Calcutta Temple. And it was a very awkward temple for women to live in, because we had a little room up the top of the stairs with all the rats that were big as cats, and we'd have to go through the men's bathroom to get to the temple. So it was really awkward and uncomfortable. But this brahmachari was just complaining, they don't put their saris over their heads. Why can't the women get a place away from the temple, separate from the brahmacharis? Their presence is not conducive to our spiritual life. And Prabhupada didn't say anything. And Prabhupada often would do that. He'd let, that saying, give a dog a rope long enough to hang himself. So he would let devotees go on and on sometimes, and then would come the chopping block. So Prabhupada didn't say anything about this for the entire walk. And then they came up the stairs to 3 Albert Road, which is where the temple was, and knocked on the door. It had been locked while everyone was away. And there was Jamuna and Palika and Shamasundar's wife Malati and Kaushalya and Madri, and all the other women who'd stayed behind to do all the temple services. And so instead of going on the walk with Prabhupada, they stayed behind to do the deity worship, to do the cleaning, set everything up. And then Prabhupada, and they immediately offered their obeisance to Prabhupada and said, Jai Srila Prabhupada. And then Prabhupada turned back to that brahmachari and he said, but if you associate with these women, you will go back to Godhead. So back to brahmacharya, and then let's look at this stage for women. So we have brahmacharinis. Now brahmacharini life is a very good life because it gives you wonderful training ground for grihastha life. But generally, brahmacharini life is meant to be for a temporary situation because by nature, women need to be married. It's quite natural. There are some women who don't marry, not a problem, but for the majority of us, training time, I was a brahmacharini for 5 years before I got married, perfect training ground for me. So if you find yourself in the brahmacharini ashram, this is a really good opportunity. And like a brahmachari, you have an uncomplicated life. You do your service, you're taken care of, and you study, and you make progress. And, you know, if you're in a situation where you want to be married, hopefully Krishna will send you a nice devotee husband. So, and it's the feminine nature to have a husband who will offer protection and respect and but if a Vaishnavi isn't married, then who offers that protection and making sure that they're well and happy? It's the temple president. That's his responsibility. And one day there was, in America, it was winter, and there was one Vaishnavi who just had a little choli on. She had no jumper, she had no chadar, and she was visibly shaking. And it was during a Bhagavatam class or a darshan. And Prabhupada said, are you cold? Everyone else is rugged up. And she didn't realise that Prabhupada was talking to her, so she didn't answer. And then he said, are you cold? And she was like shivering. And then the Prabhupada said to the temple president, once a month you go to every woman, it was in New Vrindavan, and ask them, do they have everything they need? Do they have warm clothes? Do they have, you know? And Prabhupada one day, he saw Palika, who had a hole in her sari. Palika used to cook for Srila Prabhupada. And Prabhupada was very upset that she's wearing a sari with a hole in it. And he actually gave money, from his finances to buy her some saris. So that's, really important that all of the members of our society are looked after and taken care of. And but a critical point for us to understand is that both genders should be respected and not seen as lesser. Oh, all the devotees over that side, the Mataji's that side. It has actually happened. So if, as young men, if you get the right attitude regarding women as your sisters or your mothers, and Prabhupada actually said, I read, that a man can see a woman as his sister. If you're an 18-year-old girl, it might be hard for an older man to see you as a Mataji, as a mother, but it's sister or mother. So those titles carry great respect, and the women in our movement should be treated with that respect. So fortunately that paradigm shift happened in 72. It did come around again. So we should end now. And just in conclusion, because I always over-prepare for my classes so I could speak for another hour, but I'm not going to do that. And, Prabhupada glorified the grihastas, that they're very, very important. And Jayapataka Maharaj in 2020 in Mayapur said, there are people who give seminars on time management. They charge lots of money, but if you want to be inspired by the management, just see the life of Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur. Bhaktivinoda Thakur, in our parampara, had many children, many children. Jayapataka Maharaj, he was very well organised. He had time set aside for his family, to write books, and he wrote many books, to do his business, to do his preaching and his japa, and he was a magistrate, very well known. So his time management was amazing. How he did everything very properly. I would think, Jayapataka Maharaj says, I would think that the grihasthas of today, they can learn from Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur how to manage their time, how to utilise every second in a proper way. He gave time for his family, he gave time for his children, he also had time for his preaching and his writing. Everything was very well organised. So the Grihastha ashram is a very well respected ashram. They support a lot of the time, the temples. Then we come to Vanaprastha, which is when a married couple in their older age, leave aside their family. Often the husband and wife will travel together. And then eventually the husband will take sannyas. And of course, taking sannyas now there's a period of time. There's a list that they go on, they're observed, because it's, sannyas is a very important ashram, so that needs to be honoured, and the sannyas vows need to be followed. And Prabhupada said in a lecture, just in conclusion, Prabhupada said, the Krishna consciousness movement is not that we are asking everyone to become a sannyasi like me and give up everything. No, that is not our program. You act as a brahmana, as a kshatriya, or a vaishya, or a sudra. It doesn't matter. But you try to satisfy Krishna. That is the program. And just in conclusion, as described in, this is Bhagavad Gita 9:14. As described in the second verse of this chapter, not only is this devotional service easy, but it can be performed in a happy mood. One does not need to undergo any severe penance and austerity. He can live this life in devotional service, guided by an expert spiritual master, and in any position, either as a householder or a sannyasi or a brahmachari. In any position and anywhere in the world, he can perform this devotional service to the Supreme Personality of Godhead and thus become actually Mahatma, a great soul. So thank you so much for listening. Any feedback, comments, questions? Pardon?
Thank you for such a nice class.
Thank you, Hare Krishna.
Spoke a little bit towards the end there about Yamuna Devi Dasi, a great disciple of Srila Prabhupada. And I was having lunch one day with Keshava Maharaj when he was here. And when he was a young brahmachari, it must have been in his first few years, I would say, she came to the manor, and he said that he got allocated that service to look after her and to serve her. And he said that time there, he sees that as one of the reasons why he's where he is today. I was asking him, some of the things he did within his own spiritual life, which really helped him, and he said that was probably number one. So yeah, a great female disciple of Srila Prabhupada, and it just shows male or female, doesn't matter.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And
thank you.
Through that service, he's made great advancement, and it was great for his spiritual life.
That's wonderful. And if you haven't read that book, they're 2 volumes. I forget the title now. Can you remember the title? You could look it up. It's by Dina Tarini, and it's on the life and devotion of Yamuna Devi. And I'd encourage everyone to get that book. It's 2 volumes, as I said. Unalloyed Devotion.
It's
Yeah, they're about that big, 2 volumes. My copies are in Mayapur, but I highly encourage you, if your mum or dad want to buy you a birthday present, ask them, please buy me these books. They're really wonderful and very inspiring. And Jamuna, of course, was, I had the great fortune of, when I joined the temple, after I was joining Melbourne Temple for a few weeks, I went travelling to India and I rejoined devotees in Vrindavan, and Jamuna Devi was there, and we were staying at Radha Damodar Temple. And every morning, because Krishna Balaram Temple was just like 2 layers of bricks, nothing had been built. Prabhupada's rooms were built, unfinished. But she would, the pujaris there at Radha Damodar Temple would allow her to sing the Sringadev prayers. And Jamuna Devi, she sings the Govinda Madhupusham prayers that you hear every morning. And, there in the kind of misty winter morning in Vrindavan, in front of Radha Damodar deities, and listening to her pelt out the Sringadev prayers. Even now when we sing the Sringadev prayers, I think of that wonderful time. And I used to help her clean Prabhupada's quarters, which was very interesting because the floors were unfinished, so all the concrete dust would rise up. And one morning Prabhupada came early and he ran his fingers along the desk. He said, "This has not been cleaned." You'd clean it, dust it, 2 seconds later it would be dusty again. So thank you very much for listening. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Jai Hari Hari Bol.